Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Homefront, Jason Statham's newest movie that was oddly written by Sylvester Stallone. Now, through sheer coincidence, I've been watching a lot of Jason Statham movies lately, and most of them I've seen before, but it's just strange because I had no real desire to go on a Jason Statham marathon. I wasn't really thinking about how, the end of November they'd be releasing a new Jason Statham movie, but throughout this entire month and maybe a little bit of the last month too, it's just been almost every week I've seen one of his films without really meaning to. It began with Safe, which if you have not seen Safe and you like action movies, you need to check that out. It's one of the only solo Jason Statham movies that I'd consider to be exceptional. And then I watched The Expendables 2, which of course I adore, but I've seen both of those movies before. Then I had a little bit of a nostalgia trip with The One, which is more of a Jet Li vehicle, but Jason Statham does have a prominent role in that, and it's interesting seeing him with hair and trying his best at an American accent. But it's an entertaining movie, even if it is a pretty stupid Matrix ripoff. And at the absolute least, though, it has held up better than both Matrix 2 and 3, so good job, The One. And what was the other one? I watched a little bit of Transporter 2, not too much though. And I was supposed to watch Redemption, which I believe was originally called Hummingbird, which is strange because I really wanted to see that, but once they changed the title to Redemption, like all of my interest just totally diminished. It was such a generic title that, I don't know, it just robbed all of the interest I had in the movie. I don't really understand why, because it's just a title, but seriously, whoever names these movies needs to seriously start using their imagination a little bit more. I mean, come on, Safe, Redemption, you could do a lot better than that. At least Homefront is a little better, still pretty generic, but Jason Statham has been in dollar-titled movies, although he's still better than Steven Seagal in that regard. And then this all capped off with Parker, which I really wanted to see when it was out in theaters, but then wasn't able to, so I finally got a chance to check that out on Netflix, and it was not very good. It's not horrible, it's just, I wasn't very entertained by it. I kept fighting sleep, and I thought J-Lo was annoying. Definitely not one of Jason Statham's stronger efforts, even though it had some things I liked about it. But now we finally come to Homefront, and I was actually really looking forward to this one because just based on the trailer, it looked like it was going to be a little bit different than his usual kind of movie. Yeah, the plot is very similar, but the location is new. Some of the potential when it came to the back and forth between him and his daughter was interesting. At a superb cast, which suggests that someone behind the scenes was obviously really interested in making this a hit, whereas with a lot of Jason Statham movies, I often feel like when it comes to the casting, they're just going through the motions. The filmmakers know that people are only going to watch this for Jason Statham, and why put any more money anywhere else? But no, this one had James Franco, Winona Ryder, Kate Bosworth. Once again, I always get these names wrong, so I'm not even going to. I could be wrong about that last name, but that really got me hyped up, and the trailer was really well put together, and it made Homefront look like it was going to be a good movie. Then it was released for the critics, and for the most part, very few people seem to have really liked this. The reviews were more mixed, I think, than negative, but it seemed like the negative reviews were stronger than the positive reviews. Like, the consensus is it either sucks or it's just okay. So that really caused me to scale down my expectations, as always, and I went and saw the movie. And let me get my notes up, because I have quite a bit to say, even though it's actually very little for me to say. It's okay. I enjoyed myself while watching it, which automatically puts it above Parker, but I can't call it a good movie. But I also have to praise Sylvester Stallone as the writer for trying his hardest to make it a good movie. It just didn't quite work out. The plot is pretty stupid, but in a way that was, I almost at times was wondering if it was sending up a lot of the cliches, except it never cracked a smile when doing so. What I mean is, like, it starts off with Jason Statham. He's an undercover cop, and he witnesses something horrible, and that for some reason traumatizes him into quitting his job. I didn't really understand that. Considering the person who ends up getting killed in that whole deal was not a likable person, and you don't get the impression that Jason Statham had any real attachment to him. The person was, you're apparently reaching for his gun, so that was kind of odd. But okay, you figure that's going to be the setup, but then like you find out his wife died, but that's almost a very pointless addition to the story because it never goes anywhere, and it's you never even are introduced to her. It's just you presume that she's alive when he decides to retire, then a year or two later she's dead. But considering how much time is spent on him, you know, looking at her the picture in sorrow, it's just a very odd decision. And it's like they're forcing in all these cliches, all these like backstory cliches that I almost was wondering if this was supposed to be some sort of parody, except once again, nobody really cracks a smile. Everybody's taking it really seriously, so I don't know if that was the intention or not, but it got pretty silly, even though the movie wasn't really trying too hard to be silly. And all in all, like, I could accept most of the story, but it's for the most part driven by characters making dumb decisions or just having all around misunderstandings. I felt that was like the majority of the movie is people just having a lot of misunderstandings and are acting stupid based on those misunderstandings. But and the script is pretty cliched, but that's all stuff I guess I'm used to. I think what made it go down smoother is that even if there's a lot of wasted material here and there, like the whole love interest, that never goes anywhere. She's just totally forgotten about by the third act, so I don't even know why they spent any time on that. And it's even stranger considering his wife only died like a year ago, I believe they said. So it's odd that the daughter's really pushing him to go into this relationship. But it moves, I think, relatively well, and I believe part of that is it never lingers on anything for too long before getting back to the more interesting stuff, and you know, the actors are all really trying their best in keeping the viewer invested, and I managed to be invested no matter how retarded the movie was being. And some of the decisions of various characters were just, it made them kind of inconsistent. Like at the very end, Winona Ryder captures the daughter, and I wasn't entirely sure I knew why. At first I'm thinking she's trying to save her, but then the way she's talking to James Franco, I wonder if there's more to that. Maybe she has more sinister motives. But then after that you get the impression maybe not. It just seemed like at times Sly wasn't entirely sure what these characters were all about. And I thought Jason Statham character's arc was definitely the weakest because he doesn't really develop, but the movie pretends like he is. Does he have does he have a temper? Yes, but throughout the majority of the movie, his actions are more understandable. At no point I ever feel like he was really going consciously too far. Generally, when he hurts somebody, it's just pure reflex. But then at the end, when he's beating somebody to death, his daughter is trying to stop him. He like suddenly stops, like, "Oh, what am I doing?" It's just like I never really felt I understood this character. Now this is redeemed because Jason Statham is awesome, and he gets actually more to do than he does usually. You know, as always, he handles himself very well in the action scenes. He's very charismatic. You know, he has the right kind of comic timing, but also he does have some genuine acting ability that I think a lot of people tend to overlook. You know, he really handles himself well in the dramatic scenes too. And at times I will admit that he was kind of scary. Like the one scene where he confronts James Franco's character for the first time, At first James Franco is the one who's kind of acting more sinister, but over time, like Jason Statham becomes the dominating presence to where I was more afraid of him than the freaking villain of the movie. But still, props for pulling that off. Jason Statham, like I said, I'm a huge fan of Jason Statham himself, even if his movies are usually subpar. But I thought Homefront at least utilized him very well. One of the reason I really do feel that Sylvester Stallone was trying to make a great movie, or at least a great action movie, is he puts a lot of time in developing the supporting cast. I like how a lot of the smaller characters, they don't end the movie the same way they began in terms of their personality and stuff. Various characters are introduced as being like the stock bully, for example, and in action movies that's usually all they'll be, the stock built bully who acts like a douche and then ultimately gets his ass kicked, and you think that's going to be the end of it. But no, the bully actually becomes a nicer person by the end of the movie. And other characters are the same way, where they start off very hostile and unlikable, but over time they do change. And also what I really liked is that some characters go backwards. They start off as kind of noble and likable, but throughout the course of the movie they become incredibly unstable and unpleasant. And that's something you don't usually see in an action film. So I really had to give credit to Stallone for pulling that off. And the acting is really good for the most part all around. I've already talked about Statham, but I thought James Franco was great as the villain. He was very menacing, but I like how he's not just a typical just one-dimensional villain. There's more to his character. He has some positive attributes that makes him almost admirable in certain ways, but at the same time you never do forget that he is a bad guy. But I thought Franco held his own against Statham for the most part, even if Statham once again had a stronger presence. But I also felt that they should have had more screen time together. The weakest link in terms of the acting I felt was Winona Ryder. She's very over the top, and I don't know. I just thought it was. I just thought it was too cheesy. I couldn't really buy anything about her character because of how she played that character. And I think she's a pretty good actress, even though she's had her bad moments in the past. But she was probably my least favorite in terms of just sheer acting. But I also felt that there was just too much going on within this story, that it just made the whole thing seem kind of disjointed. There's too many characters who get too much screen time, but at the same time not enough screen time to really justify having that much screen time. Like, for example, Jason Statham's friend slash co-worker. He has this one scene that's really dedicated to him in this action sequence, even though he's not in the movie very much prior to that. And when he comes back, we're supposed to be concerned for him, but there wasn't enough screen time dedicated to that character, so it didn't quite feel relevant. And as I said, the love interest is probably the worst example. In terms of the action, because that's really what we're mostly interested in a Jason Statham movie, it's very, very uneven. There are parts where I thought the direction was really good. I thought the scenery porn was really nicely done. I was surprised at how gorgeous they could make the Deep South look, which, once again, when you think the stereotypical Deep South in terms of cinema, and this film plays to most of those stereotypes. They're all addicted to meth, they're all trailer trash, but in terms of the beauty you could really find in those kinds of locations, you don't really see that too often in these kinds of movies, so I thought the director did a good job with that. Unfortunately, the gunfights really weren't enjoyable. I appreciated the sound design. I loved how the noises the guns would make, and I loved how violent the gunfights were. But the camera was just too jittery. The editing is too tight, and worst of all, the lighting is just too dark. I could not tell what the hell was going on during the last big gun battle between Statham and a bunch of biker thugs. It was just, that gave me a headache. But I did think the hand-to-hand fights were pretty good. I liked how Jason Statham could sell them. So like he'll do a technique that looks cool, but it's also very practical, and you'd totally buy that Jason Statham knows how to do this. Believe it or not, that hasn't always been the case. I have seen a few movies where Jason Statham didn't look quite as convincing when pulling off certain techniques, but he did, I think, a good job doing so here. But overall, there's only a few hand-to-hand fight scenes, so that's too bad, because for the most part, the gun battles I thought were pretty weak. And that's really all I have to say. It's, I think, a very uneven movie. I really liked what it did well. I really disliked what it did poorly. And I could see where they were going in certain areas, but I felt that the filmmakers just bit off more than they could chew. They probably should have just made a much more simple action film and just focused on giving us really good action sequences, or at least trimming the fat, cutting down certain subplots so the movie would at least be shorter. So much of this film was just kind of wasted and disjointed, but at the same time, as I said, I was never bored. I never enjoyed it any less, even when it was being incredibly retarded or incomprehensible. So it's better than like Parker, maybe The Mechanic. I thought The Mechanic was overall a much more focused movie, but The Mechanic was also kind of generic. Shoot, I can't even think of a lot of Jason Statham's newest films, but it's nowhere near as good as Safe, Transporter, or any of the Jason Statham films that people usually like, but it's not one of his worst either, in my opinion. So that is all I've got. How long was this video? Oh, 16 minutes. I better wrap this up. I did not do a written review of this, but I have done written reviews of other movies, like the one In the Name of the King 2, an Uwe Boll film, so you'll obviously love that shit. Speaking of Jason Statham, what else have I done? That's really all I've got. I'm sorry, my memory is so poor. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and all that jazz. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.